We have been talking all show long about waning retail interest in stocks. It seems like that effect is also hitting what's going on with prices of NFTs, non-fungible tokens that have crept into everything from art to music to sports. And there's a debate now about whether it was just a fad that is now over, or if we're going to continue to see volatility, but the trend might be a little bit longer lived. Zack Guzman is joining us now, anchor of the 11 to 1 block here on Yahoo Finance Live, as well as follower of all things crypto. So Zack, we have seemed to have seen prices come down reportedly. What are you hearing from folks about what happens now?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the debate, right? When we saw this really starting to take off, spearheaded by that $69 million Beeple Christie's auction that really caught a lot of eyes. But you had to wonder how many people outside the crypto space were going to jump into the NFT space, because if you're common and you're comfortable in dealing with some of these things, that pool can be pretty small. And some interesting numbers out of nonfungible.com looking at the average resale price of NFTs, down about 70% from a peak of $1,400 per NFT back in February. So we've come down quite a bit in that front, but it's not just the prices that are falling here, Julie. It's also the number of NFT sales down by about a third in the last 10 days. The number of unique buyers also down. So I think we're hitting that point here where you wonder how far along in this adoption cycle are we? Because if you move past those people who were really at the forefront of this, Justin Sun, Tron founder, crypto founder, in that Beeple auction, the next question was, all right, what about the average investor out there? When are they going to jump into NFTs? And I think we're kind of hitting that point where there's only a limited pool of people who were into these from the beginning. We're seeing prices come down, and now, it's going to be whether or not we see that next wave of new buyers, because just across the board, any metric you look at, all from nonfungible.com, not looking good, at least now.
Zack, is this just a function of too much supply coming onto the market at once? Look, I just talked to Patrick Mahomes last week, and he said he made a couple $1 million off of his NFT auction of some sports memorabilia. He likes the space, but there's a lot of supply out there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the pieces that kind of gets overlooked when we talk about NFTs, right? Because in crypto, whether you're talking about Bitcoin or Ethereum or some of these other projects, this is different in that you're basically dealing with the highest price to pay, right? It's an auction bid. Whether it's NBA Top Shot or some of these other NFT projects out there, it's how much someone is willing to pay, and the highest price is normally the one, that is the one that you look at when we look at average prices across the space. In terms of supply and demand, that's, again, one of the pieces that make non-fungible tokens by definition unique, seeing as they are unique tokens tied to specific things. And so, when it comes to sports memorabilia and everything else like that, I think we're dealing with a very different world, specifically within NFTs, separate from the rest of the crypto question there, considering it all comes down to how much one individual buyer is willing to pay. It's not as liquid as some of these other things we talk about in crypto. So you do see these weird blips, Patrick Mahomes, other sports stars getting into the mix here too. But I think once we move past that and we start to see some of the actual underlying technology used in music and media, I think we might get to a spot where we do see some more price stability. But the question now is, how far do we go down from here?
Does this feel to you like the ICO situation back in 2018? You remember, all the coins did all the stuff, everyone got all rich at the end of 2017, and then it pivoted to, no, I'm actually excited about the underlying technology. And, coin prices went down 90%. Now, they've come back because things worked themselves out. But does this feel like that kind of moment, or is that analogy not really, workable here? How are you thinking about that question?
I think that's exactly right. And we heard people talking about that a few weeks ago, looking back at the ICO space, because you'll recall there were a few out there, probably the majority, that weren't necessarily great projects. They attracted a lot of attention, and 2 years later, after raising ridiculous sums of money, don't have much to show for it. But then, of course, there are a few projects out there as well that we've seen catch on and actually deliver on what they told investors they would do. Filecoin would be one of those projects that comes to mind, trying to kind of decentralized cloud storage on everyone's computers. So there are projects out there that make sense. And I think it is very fair to use that analogy, because there's just so much going on, whether it is sports stars, another piece of that analogy, when we saw a bunch of celebrities jump onto kind of the bandwagon of raising a lot of money, because there is excitement out there and nobody really knows where these prices will go. So I think you look out 2 years, and I think we're going to see the same exact thing that happened in the ICO space. And we haven't even touched on regulation here, but I think that's another key piece that had to come in to kind of get ICOs advanced enough to where people weren't getting burned. Not to say that couldn't still happen here in the NFT space, but I think it's a very fair analogy, Miles. And I think, those winners, and Beeple certainly being one of them, those artists who have been able to make a name for themselves, there is still that cachet, and those pieces are still doing relatively well. So we'll see what happens, but I do think we are in the chapter here where it is kind of going to be separating those key winning projects from maybe some of the shadier ones. It does feel a lot like 2017.